I felt really alone, and my parents were in Germany, my sister was in Germany, and I was here trying to make a living and trying to figure things out. So the biggest thing I think that has helped me is something that my grandfather always said about me, is that I am just so incredibly stubborn that if life throws me a curveball, it's just like, hold my beer, I'm going at it.
Welcome to Our Family Invests, the podcast where successful couples come together to share their inspiring stories of balancing family, life, and business. We're Mike and Caroline Neubauer, husband and wife entrepreneurs striving to live our best lives with our family at the center. This podcast celebrates the couples who inspire us, invest in each other, and raise those around them to the next level. Join us as we explore their challenges and victories. Let's learn, share, and grow together. Today we're sitting down with Carmen and Gary Gulliksen, two driven, resilient, and insanely competitive individuals. Carmen came to the U.S. on a tennis scholarship, built a career in IT, earned multiple black belts in martial arts, and now competes in boxing professionally against opponents half her age. Gary, a proud Virginia Military Institute grad and former military officer, has transitioned from a life of service to mentoring through martial arts and finance. Together, they've built a life centered on family, discipline, and perseverance, raising 3 kids, running businesses, and proving that laughter and maybe a little friendly sparring is key to making it all work. Let's dive into their story of grit, growth, and keeping life balanced, no matter how chaotic it gets. All right, you two, fill in the gaps from that and tell us who you are.
Yeah, it's tough to follow.
Well, who are we? We got together about 13, 14 years ago now. Through martial arts, actually. Having a real diverse background. I'm originally from Germany, came over into a scholarship, and Gary had been through the military. He's originally from Richmond, and we met doing martial arts together. So we worked together in that arena for a while, developed a really good friendship, and carried it from there.
Yeah, so I was at a particular dojo, and Carmen came in, and the master of the dojo said, all right, we have a female black belt coming in, and we have no females that are black belts, and we don't have really a whole lot of female students. So make her like this. So I'm like, oh, that's great. And she came in, and my first thought was, wow, she's really attractive. My second thought was, wow, she hits really hard. That's what is intended. And we kind of just went from there. But we were friends for about 6-8 months before we started dating, and then we started dating, and it kind of has gone from there for a while. So, yeah.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah, Carmen, you're known as the Mamba. Tell us about that. And I'm trying to get that transition. How did you go from tennis to martial arts, professional boxer, author? Like, how did that all correlate together?
So let's address the Mamba part first. So the Mamba was given to me by my boxing school. The students knew that I was real committed. I was really fierce in the ring. After several months of working there, I felt the kind of toughness was given there, but I also always was a mother. And that was always my primary objective. I always brought my youngest in to the facility, and it was always a major part of who I was, who I identify as. So they were looking for nicknames, and it was just a great blend out of my personalities. One is being the fierce fighter, but on the other hand, also being the mother and having that figure as a major component of my life. So it's just a great blend coming from there. So I'm grateful for the community actually having given me that name.
Yeah, so that's cool. So it's mom, like M-O-M, not like like this, but like obviously the reference to the snake, right? The mom, right? No, that's super cool. That's super cool.
So, and how did I transition over? Well, as a young child, I was a tennis player. My family was all into tennis. That was our primary focus. But when I was about 13, 14, I got into some scuffles. I had some challenges growing up in school, and I was always interested in martial arts. The issue was that in Germany back then, the only martial arts that existed was judo. So I had to convince my parents to give me a little room from the playing tennis to allow me to do some of the martial arts, and I was able to convince them. So I started with judo just a couple of years, and tennis had to be the front runner all the time. That was the agreement that we had. So once I finished high school, I was offered a free ride to university here in the US. I accepted. And at that point, I had to fully commit to tennis, playing tennis. But once I was done with that scholarship, I really wanted to go back to martial arts. So I looked around in the American community here, and the striking arts were a big part. So you had a lot of Taekwondo, karate schools, those kind of facilities. I picked one, got into Taekwondo, continued with that, and really enjoyed the dynamic of it. It was really high energy. It was a really good community, really a lot to learn all the time. Did some competitions, really enjoyed that. I'm pretty competitive from nature. I guess that's kind of a given. Don't laugh. I'm a little competitive.
Factually accurate.
Yes. So are you. So are you. So we both are pretty good at that. But after a while, after several years, actually, I really wanted to initially compete in kickboxing, but things didn't quite work out. Until about 4 years ago, when I found a gentleman here in our area who actually was a pro kickboxer in his day. In the late 80s, early 90s, he was ranked top 5 in the world when kickboxing was almost bigger than boxing. Kind of a hidden gem in our community. Wow. And he agreed to train me with a lot of reservations because he's like, you're old. You're very old. You shouldn't be doing this. I'm like, okay, teach me anyways. But there's my stuff.
In the 80s and 90s, you were not old then.
No, he was in the 80s, 90s when he was at his.
Oh, I see. So that must have been Jean-Claude Van Damme then, right? Because he was the man in the 80s and 90s, kickboxing, right?
Yes, exactly. The Chuck Norris, the Bruce Lees.
For sure. For sure.
Of that.
Yeah, but awesome.
I was able to talk him into training me. And we kind of took it from there. He put me in a ring for a kickboxing match. Actually, it was a MMA kind of cage fight situation.
Wow.
Afterwards, he told me, well, your defense sucks and you have no hands. You need to go box. And I ended up at a boxing school. And I just really enjoy it. Wow.
So, Gary, you see her getting into the ring. How do you support her then? Do you get nervous? Do you want to come in there and pound the people fighting her if they hit her hard or what?
Or not go?
Yeah, or do you not watch?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about our relationship, but I was in the military for 22 years, and I went to military high school here in Richmond, and I went to Virginia Military Institute. My master's degree is through another military college in Norwich. And, you kind of get to a point and this is her passion. It's what she wants to do. We've had those hard conversations about, what happens if something happens and you're injured or worse, how do we address that? But we're well equipped to deal with that sort of thing. And we've had those tough discussions, very honest discussions. And when I see her in the ring, she looks happy. And to me, that's a good thing. And she enjoys it. And I know what that means to her because it means a lot to me. So yeah, I'm there for her. I support her. I go to her fights and you can hear me yelling in the background, come on, Carmen, knock her out. Put her down. We're done with this. Let's be done. But, it's just one of those things. She wants to pursue this. I also think it's pretty interesting that given the age that most people are doing this, Carmen's 48 years old. And she's really effective and very healthy and fit. I'm 53. And people are always saying, you've got this finite roadway that you can do. Well, no, as long as I'm above ground, as I say, my colleagues all hear me say that because I spent time in places like Iraq and some other places that are not pleasant, and I'm here. So it's just a gift. And if she can function and do that, and she's happy, that's good for me.
Are you ever worried about her hurting other people?
They made the choice to get in the ring.
Love
Not
that.
really.
Are you practicing Taekwondo at all anymore? Either of you?
We both still Taekwondo has not ever been one of my things. So
Okay.
There's other systems in martial arts we've studied. For me personally, I still pursue something called Combat Kido. And I've got black belts and other things. And I go to her gym, which is the boxing gym. And it's run by a VMI graduate and his partner. So, yeah, I do that. But she's all the time. My God, it's I think there's one day a week she doesn't train.
Well, it's the commitment level you have to have when, I literally signed a pro contract. So you literally commit to putting in the training. You commit to the proper diet and everything. Yeah, you have to be 100% on that. Because here's the thing too. We just recently, actually, it's still kind of in the works, but yesterday it was confirmed that we might get a title fight. which
Wow.
means I'll be fighting a girl who is 24 and she's out of Baltimore and we're going for a title. So that's a big fight. It's a 10 round of fight.
Right.
And the thing is, if I'm not in tip top shape and if I don't train properly and have the proper diet to have my energy up and make weight, and then I do risk tremendously getting injured. So everything I do is to mediate to not get injured, to make sure I can protect myself at all times.
For sure. And I imagine, being a professional, like having that professional contract, especially as someone in your face, that's not easy to come by, right? So you must be really, really good to get that kind of a contract, right?
Yeah, and I have really good people around me who can also navigate the boxing environment, because boxing is a business and it takes relationships and networking and understanding really how that works, like with any business, right? And I'm blessed that my coach actually is very well versed in that. He's very good navigating that, and he has some real strong people around him. So he knows what he's doing, and that's obviously very helpful. So I can literally just show up and do my part of the job, knowing that the other parts will fall into place as well. But my age is a big negative in that sense. It has really made it difficult for us to find fights, especially since the women field is already so slim. There are only very few women relative to men. It's still a male dominated field. Sure. And we literally get messages as in like, is this an joke that you have someone who's that age? It's like, what are you doing? Some states will not even let me compete. There are a couple of states that say you're too old, you're above 40, we're not letting you compete. And other states say you have to do all these extra medical scans and tests before we allow you to compete.
Wow. And I imagine it's not like you're not doing this for the money, right? Like there's probably not a ton of money in women's boxing, I imagine.
No, I assure you there is not.
No.
Yeah. And unless you're like represented by Don King or something, right?
Which is a whole different story, hell, but not going into that because that's a whole different arena there. Yes, women still are massively underpaid and very not well represented. It's changing and you see a lot of movement and momentum right now, but honestly, probably I will miss that bandwagon probably by a couple of years, but that's okay. But there are other avenues for it as well. One of the things, for instance, that I use the boxing for is to get my name out there, to promote what I do with my business, because my business is based on self-defense, right? So having had the success that I've had with my fights, being undefeated, really has helped me just promote myself and promote my business. It's allowed me to build a network and build connections so I can drive the other part. So the boxing, I love it, but it's really just a short-term stepping stone because I know I have a very short, small window and everybody knows that it works with me. But the other part, the business, will be what we do in the long run. And we do that together because Gary has background in martial arts as well, but the boxing helps with that tremendously right now.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. Let's go into the business and tell us about what it is that you do and where you're going to go post boxing.
Okay, so the business is about empowering any group of people who have felt fear or have been at a disadvantage or had any kind of issues almost in the past and who want to build more resilience and strength to mediate and navigate the environment better. So we do this primarily through self-defense, but also through fitness in general, and then also through mental workshops and other means, because we do have the background in that, partially through our martial arts, partially through our professions as well. I've studied health as a postgraduate degree as well, especially focused on psychiatric disabilities. We've dealt with PTSD and other things. So we're pretty well versed together in particular to address a lot of the challenges that some of these people bring to the table when they've been through their personal trauma, when they have personal interactions that were not favorable. And building them up, empowering them to become more resilient is really our goal.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it's interesting. As a male, a lot of times we will teach, and over the years this has happened, we'll teach female students who've been through trauma. and all kinds of trauma. And it's pretty distressing when you have a student that is clearly been through the ringer, so to speak, and you try to help her or whoever, and they can't control themselves when you stand within 6 feet of them because of their experiences. And I'm thinking of one particular student we remember very well who was like that. And by the time we were done working with her, she was able to throw me and throw other students and do things that at the beginning, like, she was absolutely terrified. So to watch somebody go through that level of confidence and transformation that's a pretty good thing to see.
You know, Gary, you have 22 years in the military. That's a long time.
Yeah, I served for a while.
Yeah, I'd say so. I spent 10 years as a firefighter out here. And
Appreciate that. I love
thank
the
you for your
first
service.
responders too. I do some stuff for that with work as well.
Sure. I imagine your training in the military and the things that you've seen in Iraq and whatnot. You know, as somebody who's kind of been in the first responder world and has seen a lot of things that, you know, most civilians never get to see and never should see. Right. But you are dealing with people probably that come into your training sessions that are full of trauma, that are full of, like, you know, PTSD type of situations. How are you able to use your military background to, like, calm them and convert them and change their mindsets into, you know, kind of assimilating back into society almost?
Rechanneling energy.
So that's an interesting question because I have some issues with that myself.
Sure.
I don't want to tell a bunch of war stories or get into things. And certainly there are plenty of people who were in uniform who did a lot more than I did. But I did spend time in Iraq on an Iraqi base outside of the U.S. concerns and saw some things. I have a thing I do with everybody, whether it's clients in my financial practice or whether it's students in the martial arts. I always say to people, I don't tell you I understand because I don't. I'm not in your shoes. I say I can relate. And I bring some personal stories and experience into things when I talk with people, and just kind of have a way of trying to help put them at ease. And you ask certain questions, and when they talk about their story and you listen to them, you shut up and listen. And you can affirm, because I've actually been through some of the things these people have been through, or I've had to be afraid of these things. And that's another fun thing that you learn. Well, it's not really fun. Fear is an interesting thing. And I just imagine as a firefighter, you know, you've had the experience of going into harm's way, you know, we call it going to the sound of the guns. You know, when you fear your life is threatened or some tremendous harm is going to come to you, even if it doesn't happen, that creates a change in mindset. And just being able to talk to that kind of authentically with people seems to help bridge that gap. Does that answer?
Yeah.
Did I explain that well?
Yeah, you did actually. And I think that that's something that's important to touch upon too, because I think, you know, I'm no spring chicken either. I'm 46 years old. And, you know, when I was a firefighter, you know, I did 10 years, like I mentioned. And, you know, when you were in the military, it's very male dominated. It's very alpha male too, right? And so we are not people that are used to talking about or having feeling conversations, right? Like, that's not a thing. You just, like, bottle it up and you go home and you do your work and that's it. But you know what, one of the things that I kind of started to see at the end of my career in the fire department was that was just starting to change. And we're having these conversations a little bit more and being open, and it's okay to talk about these things, because I think, you know, when we go through some things and we have an outlet for it, whether it's, you know, talking with your brothers or in martial arts or whatever, and you have that kind of release, it helps you to heal, right? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, and it's interesting you ask that or present that in that way, because I was diagnosed through the VA in 2008, and that was like a year after my first trip to the sandbox, as we say. Like, I'd been before, but you know, that type of deployment, and we were still hiding these things. I was still in uniform at the time. I still served in the reserves at that time. I was a field grade officer, and you didn't talk about certain things, and it created problems. But I will say this: we had a number of people on our base in Iraq, and when it was time to rotate out, the PA, we called him Doc, who's an Air Force guy. And I sat down because he had to have somebody certify some. And so we reviewed everybody's like exit interview, if you will. Every single person was affected in some way. And it was interesting. So I'm glad that now it's become more accepted and more, there's a better level of understanding that this is a thing and it doesn't make you weak or horrible or not as good a soldier, not as good a firefighter, not as good a person, because you can accept and talk about the fact that on the few occasions that I was afraid something was going to happen, I had to function. I was still afraid. I think courage is being able to move and operate when you're afraid. If you don't feel fear, you don't demonstrate real courage.
Yeah.
And whether that's professionally in the business place, politics, or dealing with someone who's trying to hurt you, or the threat of a fire, in a building, coming down on top of you as you're trying to bring an occupant out or something along those lines. And for Carmen's business and what she's trying to build and what I'm trying to help support her with, we saw a lot of what I described over the years when we were mostly women. Sometimes men would come in and they'd have issues. Sometimes you have police officers that, especially really big guys, that had gotten into situations and then realized, I need a little more than what what the duty belt has on it to deal with these situations, and they'd had some stress. And so again, we both have a pretty good passion about that. It's important to us.
Yeah, you both have faced huge challenges with the life you've lived thus far above ground, right? And lots of pressure. So can you tell us a time, because everyone faces that, where you are hopeless or the pressure is almost insurmountable? What was it that got you through that point? Or was there anything in particular or a method that you both decided to cling to get through that chapter?
Actually, for me, probably it was when I was at the point of having my status here in the U.S. jeopardized. I came over here on a non-immigration visa, which meant with a scholarship, once I was done with college or university, I was supposed to go back to Germany. I didn't really quite feel like that. So I tried to look for other ways of staying here, including work visas and other things. And there was a time when it got really, really difficult. And I was probably literally a decision away from having to possibly be deported or having to leave and leaving everything behind that I built for years. And that was really, really scary because I didn't really feel like I had many friends here. At that point, they either had left because they left after college or for other reasons. But I felt really alone, and my parents were in Germany, my sister was in Germany, and I was here trying to make a living and trying to figure things out. So the biggest thing I think that has helped me is something that my grandfather always said about me, is that I am just so incredibly stubborn that if life throws me a curveball, it's just like, hold my beer, I'm going at it. And I have this ability, I guess, to just acknowledge that, okay, this really, really sucks. It's really, really bad, but I'll figure it out. I'll just figure it out. My grandfather always told me, I'm so stubborn, I will be okay, no matter what happens. And I tell myself that's like, my grandfather said that. Here we go. So one deep breath and here we go. And then just one step at a time. But to me, that's actually that one line from my grandfather that he said, I was like 6 years old, to my mother. She worried about me. And my grandfather told us, you don't have to worry about Carmen. Worry about her sister. She's so stubborn, she'll always be okay. And it always was in the back of my mind. It's like, you just have to be stubborn enough. Just don't quit. Be stubborn enough and figure it out. You'll figure it out.
And you did.
I did.
I'll tell you, one of the proudest, there are several things Carmen's done I'm really proud of. And actually, this is a great opportunity for me to say in front of her how I feel about it. When she got her first master's level black belt, I was really proud of her for that. I was proud of her for her first fight. Always proud of her fights. We have professional discussions about that. But the day that she obtained her citizenship after years of being prepared and everything, that was a great day when I was there and she took that oath and, she became a U.S. citizen and that was all done. That was because it was a long road.
17 years. 17 years of citizenship. Oh my God, 17.
So yeah. And I was going to share one other thing. You were asking about how we get through. And, I think sometimes having things that you can anchor to is helpful. So I don't know if you've ever seen a KIA bracelet or a Killed in Action bracelet, but I've worn this since 2003. I mentioned I went to a military high school here in Richmond called Benedictine, and I went to Virginia Military Institute. I have a classmate who I went to school with. I'm not going to say his name, but he's someone who he was like everybody like in the class loved him, all classes. He was my classmate at the Institute. He was my classmate in high school. We were on the drill team, ran together, stuff like that. He was the first of us killed in Iraq in 2003 from the Institute. There's a part of me that's always felt like, he was a young guy. He hadn't been married. He'd never had kids. Everybody loved this guy. And it's like, wow, the best of us was taken. So, and I've never said that before really to anybody, but like every day is a gift. And so when I say every day above ground is a gift, or, I'm still above ground, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because I actually could wear a bracelet for probably about 20 or 25 guys that I knew, and they didn't come home. And so that's like, you've been given something, you can make something of it, right? And so that's kind of my anchor.
Love that. I love that. You guys, one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of touch on that too is because everybody has stuff that they need to deal with, right? Like we see excuses from so many people of why they're not living their best lives. And I have a hard time with that. And actually going back to the military, we were just talking about this earlier. She was asking me like, what are my favorite books? And one of them is Extreme Ownership. And because everybody gets thrown curveballs and everybody has to go through hard times. And if you can take that ownership of like, hey, that happened, let's see the light in it, or let's look at it in a different way, it helps you to move along. It helps you to heal. It helps you to be the best person for the rest of the people that are in your life. And it doesn't mean like in your situation, it doesn't mean forgetting about your friends. It means living for them. Right. And I think that that's a really important aspect. And I think that's something that, a lot of people look at entrepreneurs. We're all entrepreneurs here, and look at entrepreneurs as like, they see the success stories, right? But they don't see the grit and the grind that goes through to get there, right? And it's not always easy. All of us deal with a lot to get here. And a lot of people wouldn't go through that. So it's that resolve that you both have that I love hearing, like how you're dealing with that. We heard your dogs a minute ago, and I think this is great because you guys, on Carmen, on the intake form, you wrote all kinds of like, we have like a farm here, like
and ferrets,
and plants and fish and dogs and 3 kids you're raising, and it sounds like absolute chaos to me. But both of your jobs, your professions are so order and discipline driven. Like, how do you merge that order and chaos?
That's what we need to have. Is the
That's
chaos over here.
Gary, do you need more ferrets?
Chaos. So it's like,
Yeah.
Say again?
I said Gary feels like he needs some more ferrets in his life.
sure.
So our 9-year-old decided that he liked the idea of having ferrets. So Carmen, unbeknownst to me, had an agreement with him. Yeah, unbeknownst to me, that if he could create, if he could figure out a way to provide and pay for the ferrets, that we would obtain them. That little guy, so he would have been about 8. He put together like a spreadsheet of costs and expenses, and man, he did it.
Wow.
And it's they're cute, and I have to be honest, it's kind of fun to watch him play with them and all of that. And I've decided they're not just long rats, but they're they are kind of charming and nice, and they make him happy. So that's a good.
I think too.
That's one we have now that the male does try to bite my toes, but that's kind of a theme for me. We had
But biting your toes?
no happy. We had to make some decisions about some things last year. I had some opportunities that I decided not to pursue largely because I saw Carmen in the ring and I saw how happy she was just at a sparring session on a Saturday. we see our 9-year-old. He's happy. The ferrets make him happy. One of the dogs behind us was a rescue, and then she was like, "Hey, can we foster a dog?" I said, "You mean can we have a dog?"
No, I said foster. I said foster,
Uh-huh.
and then
I
I started
said,
naming him.
and the next thing I know, now we have 2 dogs, but they make them happy. Just not to disclose too much, but as you can imagine, with my background, there are some things that I'm not always the happiest individual. So when my family's happy and I see them in a good place, that's good.
We can't relate to that at all. No.
But as far as like for what Carmen's trying to do, like she has a really unique opportunity to make a big difference in a space that, you know, I'm a financial advisor professionally now, and I serve a lot of veterans and military, and I really enjoy that work, and I enjoy helping them, and that's really cool. As kind of a hobby, I can help Carmen with what she's doing, but I don't know how much you guys know or how much your audience knows about martial arts and that kind of world, but it's a very, like you described, type A, male dominated, very aggressive type of environment. And while we might be able to withstand that and enjoy it and get a lot out of it, there's a whole part of the population walking around that don't really understand what to do or how to stay safe or feel safe. And it's intimidating to walk into a space where all the guys are bigger than me and tougher looking than me, and they've all got black belts. And if you've ever been to a jiu-jitsu gym and rolled, or been to a boxing gym and gotten hit in the face or whatever, it's not something most women want to do, and not something, frankly, a lot of men want to do. And so Carmen is in a position where she can present that and help people get empowered in a way they can be comfortable.
Yeah.
And getting past that, a lot of times, I think, just to get them in the door and look at it and be like, okay, I don't have to run away from this. I can do this. And she's very good at conveying that. Sorry.
Hey family, real quick. If you would prefer to watch your content, head on over to Our Family Invests on YouTube. You can watch this podcast and more over there. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that little bell icon too to make sure you never miss an episode. And now, back to the show.
Because I think that's one of the benefits of your age too, Carmen, is you're a pioneer. You're somebody that was at the forefront before it was even a thing. And you've been doing it for a long, long time. So you are that role model that a lot of the younger women can look up to. And I know you've written a book too.
Yes.
You want to tell us about that?
Sure. It was actually something that I have had taken notes on for a long time over my martial arts career. And it's very bare bone, but it's really addressing some of the key components that anyone could take and implement to just feel a little bit safer and protect themselves, protect their families. And when I noticed a lot of shifts in the environment because of the elections, and a lot of women actually approached me, or I heard women talk to each other about just feeling so unsure, just feeling not really safe, not knowing what to do and where to turn, I felt it was a good time to take all that material that I had and essentially rewrite it a little bit to make it appropriate for these times. And that's why it's actually a guide for volatile post-election times. And I think it really resonated with a lot of the women to actually look into that, because it just gives them a little bit of an edge of feeling a little bit empowered. Because every time you take, and you know that as an entrepreneur too, illness is really horrible way of almost sliding into a depressed state, because if you don't take action, then your mind just keeps spinning, and you actually psychologically really can't go down the hill a little bit. But once you start taking a step towards something that is worthwhile, it's really empowering. And the book is really a manual to do that. So when you read it, you can say, okay, I can take these steps actively. I can secure the perimeter of my house. When I go out with my child, these are the steps I can take to feel I'm making the outing safer for my child and myself. And by just taking those steps mentally, you actually start feeling more confident. You actually start feeling empowered. That then provides an aura around you that makes you stand up a little straighter. that makes you relate to your environment a little bit more confidently. And studies have actually shown that just by that change in your personality and your charisma, you actually are already starting to deter some of the attacks that would otherwise come. Because attackers tend to look for the shy, demure, the little insecure kind of person, especially with women. And it's amazing how much of a change you can provoke by just taking those little steps. And that was the purpose of the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a female too, I can certainly relate to that. And it's like, especially with a child or a young child, is you want to be as safe as possible. But if someone were to actually do something, what would you actually do to protect your child? Even if you're wanting to do your best, right? And you would do tooth and nail, but having actionable steps is already a huge key.
It is huge. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we're making sure is, number one, prevention goes way further than anything else, right? So there's a lot about how do you prevent getting into certain situations, awareness and other things. But on the flip side too, it helps you understand what other steps you could take when something is happening actually in a situation, because our premise is always just to get you home. It is never to cage fight. It's never for you to pick a fight or be the hero, right? Yeah. That's not what it's about. What it's about is like, we make sure that you get home to your children, that you get home to your family. Period and over. That's all we care about. And you deal with the rest later.
I love that.
So that's something I think that some people forget when they think about martial arts. They think
Totally.
it's all about, well, when you train martial arts, it's about learning how to fight.
Yep, right.
Really, it's learning to fight and how it works so you don't have to engage. Right?
Exactly.
So a lot of people, I think, don't realize that is a big part of martial arts.
The art of fighting without fighting.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So you guys have 3 kids. Have you trained them in martial arts? Do you encourage them in martial arts? Do they train with you?
You take that one.
So our older kids, we've trained since they were probably about 6 and 8, and got them to where they were pretty well versed. Now, my daughter doesn't really do that any longer. Oldest boy, he is actually considering getting into amateur boxing. He's actually really good, and he's continuing to box at the same gym. Enjoys that. I've had my youngest to like jujitsu and trying to get him into that sort of thing. He doesn't really like it a whole lot yet, but he has had a few occasions before we started homeschooling him to where actually it was one of the reasons we took him out of school, because he got in trouble for protecting himself. But he knew what to do, and he didn't hurt the other kid, but he got the other kid to leave him alone. And it's a life skill like anything else. And one of the things that you find is kind of a misnomer. If you know how to defend yourself, it doesn't say that you're going to beat every man or woman in the room. It just means you know how to defend yourself, so you're going to stand up for yourself. And that confidence level tends to help you avoid getting into trouble that should be avoidable. Yeah. And we always say 80% of self-defense is self-awareness and avoiding situations that are going to put you in places you don't want to be, or circumstances you don't want to be. Yeah. And if you know what you're looking for, you can avoid better.
Yep. You know, the other day we have an 8-year-old son, and he trained in Taekwondo for a little bit, and he doesn't anymore. He would rather play Fortnite or Minecraft or whatever than pretty much anything else. But the other day, he was at school, and they have this little waiting area for the bus before they come home, and he's in 3rd grade, and there's this little 2nd grader that we know, or first. How old is Cooper?
1st grade.
1st grader, and he's sitting there, and there's a bigger kid, a 4th or 5th grader or something, that's just picking on this kid, and my son went over there and just like broke up that fight. He's like, "Hey man, enough," right? And they ended up getting in a little fight, and the kid ended up punching Nico a few times, our son, and Nico kicked him into the fence or whatever, and that was the end of that, right? And he came home and he told me about what happened, and I was so proud of him for standing up for somebody else, because it's not about the fighting. I don't care if he wins or loses. He had a little scar on his face or whatever, but like, it's about doing the right thing. And I think that's one of the things that martial arts teaches you, is to have that confidence and to do the right thing, and so I think I love hearing your perspective of like, it's not about the fighting. I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like what I see out here in Hawaii is it's all about, a lot of the martial arts schools and whatnot are all jujitsu based, and it's all about fighting and getting in the ring and everything else. But for me, martial arts has always been a philosophy first and foremost, and it's about how to live your life. And that's something that seems to have gone away in a lot of the schools. And instead it's more training towards how to win a fight. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I think there's some traditions that we need to get back to in the martial arts.
Interesting philosophy about this, because like I'm not the one getting in the ring and competing. Have I thought about it? Yeah. Do I really want to? Not right now. Maybe I never will, but I've had to get training because of what I did professionally as a soldier. And again, I've had a few incidents here and there where things needed to be done. And so I've always pursued martial arts from the standpoint of what's usable. But philosophically, I think it's important to get that. When we used to teach the children, you're trying to enforce like the sense of honor and discipline, be a gentleman, be a lady, yes sir, no sir, respect, have a solution. There's a reason we line up the way we do. There's a reason we bow before we do things in traditional martial arts. Now in boxing or jiu-jitsu nowadays, you really don't. But like if you've done jiu-jitsu, when you come in and you fist bump and you get ready to go, there's certain rituals that all these systems and arts have, and they establish operating parameters, and it builds consistency, and it builds what does right look like and what is understanding, and whether you're gi or no gi, you still have a way to dress and an appropriate way to conduct yourself. And there are some rules. You're expected to do that. And if you don't follow those rules, you're ostracized, because that's not how we do things as professionals or as honorable men and women, right? So I think that's very important to keep in mind. And again, from a self-defense standpoint, it's about going home. It's not about or mitigating injury. It's not about winning. It shouldn't be. Unless I have a mission to go on, my job is to go home to my family and be present, be alive, be present. Because somebody's a jerk in a parking lot or something, stole my parking space, is not a reason to get out of my car and start a fist fight. That's ridiculous.
Correct.
But if you put your hands on my child or me, I should be able to protect my child, protect myself, and go home. And that's a misnomer. But I also think that for some people, because of the way Hollywood portrays things and people have been conditioned, we've either been conditioned to think it's all about a fight, or we're cowering and we're going to be, victims. Now, you can avoid being a victim and still be a confident person, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'd say I definitely second that, and I've taught a children's program for over a decade. So the whole discipline, especially with children, you have to be very diligent about how you frame things and portray things, because they might take you really literally verbatim, and you need to be careful that you direct them with the right intent. And there are some instructors that don't necessarily do that. But most instructors, I think, at least instructors I've always worked with or we've worked with, always had first heart with the children to make sure that they grow up having confidence, that they know their limits too, because when you engage in things like martial arts, you're starting to realize that, there are certain limits I have that I need to make sure that I never get myself into that situation or avoid that. So there's a lot to it. One of the reasons why I personally chose to go in the ring and to train in that way, number one, obviously I wanted to push my own limits, and I want to see how much I can learn and how far I can take it. But a big part of it is I always had in mind building this women family center program that I'm working on with, or that we're working on with the business. But I always felt that in order to really provide women and families with the best information and training, I had to understand better what it means to be in a serious conflict, where I actually kind of get dragged into the deep end of the pool and drown a little bit. So I know and understand what mentally is actually involved being in that situation. Because if you haven't been, because I'm not a soldier, I haven't been in those situations. And if I've never been in that situation, can I really advise you on what happens to you when you're under that stress of a personal attack? No, I felt like I couldn't. So part of why I'm putting myself out there is that I really want to understand, well, when your adrenaline goes through the roof, there are certain things that happen to you. What are these things? What have I done personally, or people around me done, in order to mitigate that? How have they prepared so that when they get in a situation, that they can handle it? What does it make them feel like when they're getting out of that situation? I give you an example. My very first fight was supposed to be, my pro debut was supposed to be last year in January. It didn't happen. I was already gloved up, wrapped up, gloved up. My music was playing. I was literally about to walk out the door, and they called it. They medically disqualified my opponent because her blood pressure went through the roof, and it would have been a hassle for her to get in the ring. So I was all hyped up. They did a great job to really get you fired up so you're ready once you step in the ring. But because I didn't have an outlet for it, I had all the stress. I was so wrapped up in it. Because I didn't have an outlet for it, I actually psychologically and physically completely crashed afterwards. I was a basket case. The full next day, I was like hot, cold, hot, cold. I was shivering on the couch. I was physically exhausted. I didn't know what was going on with me. And that is simply because of the adrenaline burn and then having no way to release it. But it shows you how powerful that is in that situation that you're getting yourself into. Now imagine a lady who's never dealt with combat or has never dealt with even thinking about doing anything like that, getting into a stressful situation and having to deal with all of that. That's going to be a lot to ask of her. And then coming out of it too, dealing with that is really a lot to ask of too. And actually there's statistics that show that people that get into conflict situation who have never prepared or mentally kind of wrap their mind around getting into these interpersonal combat situations, even when they survive the actual encounter, afterwards, they're a lot more damaged. They have to deal with a lot more psychological fallout, like PTSD and other issues, than someone who simply has tried to prepare themselves a little bit for that, maybe wrap their head around it before they actually got in the situation. And that's a significant difference. You survive something, but now you're not functioning anymore. But if you prepared yourself, now you can function, work through it, and move on and have your life back afterwards.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting perspective because, like, when you hear that fight or flight mode, but I've been in a couple of situations where I feel like I responded well, but then after that exhaustion, that brokenness, that like processing, if I had done something to prepare for that or to be aware of what that looks like or be aware of what the situation could escalate to, that probably would have helped with that processing after and that aftermath. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, preparing and training for things, it puts you in a position where you're not as surprised, a better chance of being resilient, better chance of coming back to where you were. And I think, for those people who've been through something that generates PTSD, like it doesn't go away, but it becomes manageable. And at least that's been my personal experience. But the martial arts was a big part of that. Also found like one of the big solutions these days at the VA is to give everybody medication. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So for a couple of years, I did acupuncture. And that was very helpful, but nothing has ever been as effective as training because that's something the person's actively doing and they've taken control back. And that makes a difference, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned in your email that sometimes you solve disagreements personally on the mat.
Yes.
And I was like, I don't think that method will work for us, but babe, let's dive into that. But who knows? Let's dive into that a little.
I think that sounds awesome, actually. But I gotta know, like, you guys are pretty well trained. I mean, is there a limit? Are you going at like 80%, or you're both pretty competitive? Do you go?
We are very competitive,
but who usually wins?
Depends on what we do.
Everybody asks that stupid question.
It depends on what we do, but I mean, we go pretty hard, but we also, again, goes back to your limits. He's still a guy. He outweighs me by.
He can still sit on you
by a few pounds, and just by the virtue of that, I know my limit as a lady that I need to be very careful, and he knows that too. If he was just laying into me, he can seriously harm me. And we're not going to go there, right? So we always make sure we're protected. We know what it takes, what it looks like, but we get a good workout in. we work things. The kids sometimes it's funny. It's a funny story. In one of the martial arts we're training, we used to do pressure points, and we have our kids, the older kids. I think Ethan and Betsy were like 12, 14 years old, and we're in the kitchen. We got into one of these pressure point wars where we literally like, here's the arm tree, there's the leg, and I'm limping. I cannot feel my leg because he got really good. And my son walks in, he's like, what are you guys doing? You're killing each other. We're like, no, we're fine. It's like I have tears streaming down my face. We're laughing though. It's just because there's little tweaks. I'm like, oh my God. But, we work it up.
So I'll put this in perspective. We'd been dating for a while and, decided I was going to ask her to get married. So
that was right after the sparring session.
The night that that's why I was going. The night that I proposed, we had a pretty good, this particular dojo where we trained, we used to have Fight Club on like Tuesdays and Thursday nights. Yeah, the guys at the dojo knew that I was going to do this. And so we were actually going at it pretty hard. It was just like, by the time we came home, because I asked her at home, I didn't do it in public. And it was, we were just exhausted. Just like puddles on the floor from the workout when we were done. So not just to resolve disagreements, to have fun and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a shared thing that we do.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is how you met, right? So if you do have the sparring match and someone concedes or wins, does that translate to real life on whatever the disagreement was over?
I wish. Not really. To be honest, we don't even really remember what started the argument in the first place.
That's good.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And we just move on. But it just kind of, we get more level-headed. It's like almost like a physical and emotional response where you're just like, okay, let's just talk. And the emotions are more almost flatlined in a way. So you're not having these huge up and downs, because that's really, I think, in conversations or discussions or arguments, what gets you is that you get so hyped up emotionally that you start saying things or become reactive in a way that things come out of your mouth where you shouldn't really go to. And so you need to really no, never. So you really should take a couple of steps back and just kind of relax, because once you're level-headed, none of this stuff really comes out of your mouth. None of the stuff, you would never say those things if you weren't so emotionally charged. And that's, I think, where this exercise, and it could be any kind of exercise you do together, but in our case, it's just because we can do this together very specifically, and it just gets our minds really nice and even and flat, and the emotional swings are kind of gone.
Yeah, that's a great point, to get out that energy so it's not an emotionally charged conversation. I love that.
Yes.
Do you ever get the neighbors calling in on you, like domestic abuse going on in your house or anything?
We had someone actually.
But the interesting story. So again, Carmen's originally from Germany, naturalized citizen. So her American perspective is sometimes a little skewed from what others are. So several years ago, she was, that's fair, I guess. She was working at a company. It's a pretty well-known not-for-profit that does some really good work around the world. And she was presenting, it was the board or something.
Oh, God.
And it was after one of our sessions the night before, and we'd all been going pretty hard. Well, when you get hit in the face or things, you get black eyes, and I've had my nose broken and stuff like that. So apparently we had a sparring session, and I had left a couple of marks. And it wasn't just me. I mean, we had like probably 6 or 8 people that we trained with for this time. But apparently what came out of her mouth was, because they asked her what happened, and she's like, oh, it's okay, my boyfriend just hit me last night, or something like that. And they thought it was some domestic abuse thing. And so people were like, what do we need to do? And then one of the other guys that was there sometimes trained with us, and Carmen's way better boxer than I will ever be mechanically and finesse and everything. I'm just like way more like, and back then especially, like just like a brawler. And so this other guy was too. And we would go at it like really hard. And he just said, hey, you guys don't understand. Nobody hit anybody. This was like training.
No, that was unusually. Yeah. That's what he said.
So
Rachel, I agree.
use that situation, but when you ask that question, it brings that memory to me. It's like, yeah, that was
the first impression too. I was just hired on like 3 days before that, and I had to make that presentation to the board of directors.
Oh, that's
Like
so funny.
one of the highest medical executives in the U.S. I walk in this boardroom with this big shine, and they're like, "Do we need to call someone?" And then this
That's
black guy's like, "No, they do it by mutual agreement. It's fine, trust me." And they're like, "Okay."
Wow.
That's amazing.
And she was there for many years after that. So
Yeah,
it's not
it was.
like it messed anything up, but
Good
boy,
job.
oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Carmen, what is your walkout song?
It changes here and there a little bit. I usually take something German.
I
Okay.
was gonna say, did you choose American?
So
or
nobody
German?
understands what it says. I'm just like, okay, whatever. So, but it kind of changes. Depends a little bit on the mood that I'm in. It really depends a lot on how I prepare for the fight and what I know about the other person too. Because sometimes I pick something that I know might mess with the opponent.
Nice.
You know, like give them
Very
a certain
nice.
impression I want them to have. You know.
When she had the kickboxing fight that was an exhibition, her walkout song was Hollywood Undead. And if you know that song, it's not exactly a family friendly lyrical. Like it's got like 75 like parental warnings on the label kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was her walkout song.
Nice.
What was the proper genre for the crowd?
Wow.
So, yeah,
Was that the
was like
song
an
where
MMA exhibition, so it was a bunch of knuckle dragging people.
is that the song that gave the other opponent the high blood pressure and they couldn't come out?
No, that was not that one.
Okay.
That was a kickboxing fight that we had. MMA style kind of fight. So,
Okay.
but yeah.
All right. Well, okay. I like lightening this up and kind of like ending on some fun notes here, but you're going to hate this question because you've heard it a million times. Okay. But I have a guilty pleasure of watching old Chinese movies, and that is my happy space. And so I got to ask the question that you know is coming: Bruce Lee or Jet Li, and why?
Oh, there's no question about it.
And do you both agree?
Hopefully he answers correctly. I know who I think is no question about it. Do you? I think so. I think we're on the line.
Oh, philosophically and alignment-wise,
Bruce Lee. There you go.
all
Let me
day
hang.
long.
Let me hang. Bruce Lee. Yeah,
Still married?
See, we don't have to spar tonight.
Okay.
Bruce Lee has just done has provided such an incredible impact on the martial arts world in the United States and all over the world. And nobody can compare with that, really, if you think about it. Just the philosophy that he's added to it, the mentality. He's the reason why we ended up with kickboxing in the Western world the way we did. And a lot of the other martial arts spinning off from that.
Yep.
Even if you go back now and look at his studies, the things that he talked about in general about physical fitness and lifestyle and other things, there's still, yep, there you go. I have my book somewhere too. I think upstairs, but yep. Actually, my boxing coach gave me that book too. So it didn't transcend into boxing. It's so, I mean, people still practice and know that his science was sound and he was on the forefront of everything.
Well, so it's interesting you asked that question for a couple of other reasons too. So everybody knows like who Chuck Norris is, and he had a relationship with Bruce Lee. Well, one of his contemporaries was Bill Superfoot Wallace, or is. And Superfoot has come to some of the disciplines that we're involved with and taught seminars and things. So we've got pictures with Superfoot, and so it's interesting how that lineage goes through. But the thing about Bruce Lee that I always like when you look at his stuff, if you've seen, I'm sure you have, his interview where he talks about "Be water, my friend."
Yep.
It's very much in line with like from the self-defense philosophy that we kind of follow, the different systems and everything that Carmen just was talking about. So, yeah, I mean, not to take anything away from Jet Li and what he did as part of the national team for China and the other things that he's done over time. But, yeah, I think Bruce Lee all day long.
And you're right with the lineage. I don't know if you're aware, but one of the things that Bruce Lee did, he knew that he didn't have certain experience when it comes to actually the combative side. So he actually worked together with Joe Louis and actually taught Joe Louis some of his principles, and then Joe Louis took them and actually tested them, so to speak, in kickboxing matches in the ring. And Joe Louis was one of the best kickboxing fighters ever. And then Joe Louis took what he learned from Bruce Lee and came up with the fighting principles. The fighting principles are the cornerstones of the martial arts lineage that I actually train under. So it's Joe Louis and then other grandmasters that we have that took those fighting principles, worked with Joe Louis, and actually handed them down. And we directly with second generation and we're training with that. So we have to be a little biased on that.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I didn't think that there was a wrong answer. I'm a huge Jet Li fan and a huge Bruce Lee fan. Both of them are phenomenal martial artists in their own right. And I think you're right. Bruce Lee probably has had more impact on Western civilization than maybe any other Asian in history, right? Yeah. But I love Jet Li is one of my heroes, and I want him on this podcast at some point. I would love to meet him. He's one of my absolute idols.
Now, what is the biggest thing about him that makes you such a fan of him?
As far as it's not as much his martial arts, though I do think that he's incredibly quick and fluid. But I do think I like his philosophy and I like his lifestyle and I like the person that he's become to be somebody that started, at such a young age and won national championships for China and then has progressed into, the movies and the Hollywood scene and then kind of gone away from that again and getting back to being a full Buddhist and writing books and, committing his life to his principles and philosophy. I think that there's a lot of honor in that. And so I love him as an individual. So that's me, but I love talking martial arts. I think it's great. And
he does.
Yeah.
He makes me watch Once Upon a Time in China. Yeah. What's next for you both professionally, personally? Do you have any family retreats on the books? You've got your upcoming fight, hopefully a title in the works. We're going to put it out there. And Gary, you're still helping VAs.
Retreats. We don't have really a retreat schedule plan. We should.
We don't do enough of that sort of thing. I mean, for me, I'm just, I'm really focused on developing some things with my financial practice. And also the firm I'm contracted through, I do things to develop people that are new in the business there too. And so that's important to me. So building that. And the other thing is just helping Carmen really make her business go and reach as many people as we can to, make things better for them.
Yeah, the goal for us on that side is that we want to have a certain number of seminars by the end of the year. And then next year, my goal is to have a broad enough persona out there and reach out there that we actually going to have a summit in the spring next year where we have major events where we bring people together to learn, but also where I want to bring in specialists to talk about not just martial arts, because again, that's part of it. That's only one of our tools, but I would love to get people like, for instance, Chase Hughes and some others to come in and be able to talk about body language. How do you handle yourself, de-escalation, and then the psychological side of that too. So that's my dream for next year, to have a major summit where I bring specialists from those main components that we integrate in the business, bring them together to address those components and offer them.
I love it. So Carmen, last question. If people want to connect with you guys, where can they do that? Do you have a website, Instagram? Like, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes and yes. I have a website that's currently in the works. I will send you the link for that so you can put it in the comments as well. Instagram is a great way to follow me. It has all the updates every day of events that are coming out, including my boxing, but also my self-defense. And those are pretty much the best ways to get in touch with me regarding that. The book is also a great start. Everything is in the book as well. So that's another way of getting in touch. And that's...
Yeah, I mean, if people want to talk to me about any of the things I've mentioned, I can send you a link for, my email.
We'll link that in.
For Instagram, it's Carmen, and then MOM, So they actually know the mom.
Carmen the Mamba.
I love that.
It.
I love that.
Awesome. Well, you guys, we've taken enough of your time, so we really, really appreciate you guys coming on. Thank you so much. Best of luck in your next fight, title fight. Definitely keep us posted on that. So thank you guys again so much for coming on. You guys have been fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. It's been really, really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been very nice. Thank you. bet.
Thanks for being part of the family today. If you want to see more of our journey through our personal life, businesses, and adventures, give us a follow on Instagram at Our Family Invests.
If you like this podcast, share this episode with a friend. And if you really want to support us, we would be so grateful if you would leave us a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Your review helps us to reach a bigger audience and bring on more amazing guests. Thank you so much. We really, truly appreciate you.